Hey guys, and welcome to this video. I want to talk about some of the approaches to Teams deployment and adoption. And really, when we look at Teams deployment, generally when we're talking to customers, we have two approaches or two pathways, so to speak. And they both have their pros and cons. And you may find for your business one works better than the other. But I want to share a few of my thoughts on which one you might want to think about using for your organization. So, path one is really having a narrow audience, but giving them a deep and rich experience. So, really, this is a very methodical approach to deployment. And generally, when I think of this, you may think of it differently, but when I think of it, there's a couple of ways that you might think about mapping into this narrow audience. So one might be location based. So for example, you might do London office, then you might do America and China or whatever it may be. Or you might think of it as a departmental deployment. So you might do legal, HR, finance. But when you're doing this narrow audience, really what you're looking to do with your Tiger team, your Teams adoption team, is go in and get them completely set up for what they need in their organization. So, if that location needs video conferencing, IM, presence, and all of that, you come in and do that, and it's all done before then you scale out to the next part of the organization. So, there's a couple of things that come to mind if you go this route. One, there's quite a lot of pre-prep work and you need quite a few resources to really execute this so that you'd have to go back and do it again a few months down the line, which, isn't necessarily a bad thing anyway, but you really need to be efficient when you're doing these multiple deep dive experiences. So that's one thing. Second thing is user experience. Today, as more and more people start working remotely, you're going to make sure that they can communicate in a very fluid way to each other. And if one person's on Teams because we've gone in and we've made this adoption in, say, London, but then another team's still using WebEx, Zoom, or whatever it might be, it's hard for them to communicate together without causing some form of friction in their experience. So, with that being said, that's where the second approach comes, where really now instead of looking at a narrow audience, we're looking at a broad audience, but we may not necessarily go as deep day one. So instead of going as deep, we get what we might say in the development world are minimum viable products, which might be instant messaging, presence, file collaboration, Teams, and that, but not necessarily diving deep into the audio and video side of the house. So that might be an example. So here our goal is really to go wide across the organization very fast, but it's still safe, right? We still want to make sure the admin console is set up. We still want to make sure that governance is set up, but we may not go as deep as we would in our original conversation. But then we want to give everyone that level 100, level 200, so the fundamental training as we go wide and fast. And then once everyone has it, this is where we go back to that first methodology and we can start working with the business units after the event to make sure that we can give additional and greater value of Microsoft Teams. So for me, especially right now as more and more people are working remotely, I've really moved away from what we used to do a lot more in my desktop engineering days and that where we did a more narrow and deep experience. I've really moved further to that broad audience, the MVP, and getting the tools out there, getting your users adopting it, and then incrementally working on getting more and more features and communication and training as time goes on into your company.